There were some technical issues in connecting and my PC hanging out. So I have shared a note, and this is how we'll broadly go about it. There are provisions that we have to see, which is really Order 40, and there are judgments that we'll have to discuss because there are some aspects of the Office of Court Receiver or court receivership per se, which have developed through judicial proceedings. So firstly, the first thing that we will look into is, if you see the note, the statutory provision that we have to be aware of, which is Order 40. Order 40 of CPC of 1908. Rule 1 is something which is relevant for our purposes, and Rule 3. So let's see Rule 1. This is the power of the court to appoint a court receiver when the court finds it to be just and convenient. The court receiver can be appointed in respect of any property, whether before or after a decree. This will have some significance in terms of the judgments that we will discuss, namely whether the court receiver can sell a property before a decree is passed, or it can be only after a decree is passed. Uh, Sub-rule B, remove any person from possession or custody of the property. Number 3, commit the same, that is the property, to the possession, custody or management of the receiver. Confer upon receiver all such powers as to bringing and defending suits, and for realization, management, protection, preservation and improvement of property, the collection of the rent and profits thereof, the application and disposal of such rent and profits, and the execution of documents as the owner himself has or such of those powers as the court thinks fit. See sub-rule 2. Nothing in this rule shall authorize the court to remove from the possession or custody of property any person whom any party to the suit has not a present right to remove. This will be an important adjunct to sub-rule 1. We'll discuss in course of our lecture today, or our discussion today. Rule 2 is remuneration. We'll come to it later. Let's see sub-rule 3, which is duties. Every receiver so appointed shall furnish such security, if any, as the court thinks fit and proper, duly to account for what he shall receive in respect of the property, submit his accounts at such period as the court deems fit, pay the amounts due from him as the court directs, be responsible for any loss which is occasioned. Rule 4 deals with enforcement of receiver's duties. And as far as the Bombay High Court is concerned, we have to see the Bombay Amendment, which is sub-rule 4, which would come on your screen as we see now. This is what happens if the receiver fails to perform his duty. Now, it may appear to us, for those of us who have been appearing in the Bombay High Court, that this is something which is very unlikely, because we all know that the office of the court receiver is a full-fledged office, in that sense attached to the Bombay High Court. It has its own staff, its own rules which govern its duties and functions, Chapter 30 of the Bombay High Court rules, and reports we have seen day in, day out being filed, which are known as court receivers report. So why does this, why would this appear to us, is because if you see point number 2, office of the court receiver is something which is peculiar to the Bombay High Court and some other chartered high courts. If you see in district courts, you will really find that district courts don't have an office of court receiver as we have it. You won't have that kind of institution, if you may call it, and therefore court receivers, as far as district courts are concerned, the person who is appointed as a receiver really need not be a judicial officer. It would be someone who may be an advocate or a person who resides within the district, or such other capable person as the court thinks fit and proper. It is possible for the court, under the auspices of Order 40, to even appoint a government official. Now, if you see Order 40, Rule 5, which is just above point 2, when collector may be appointed as a receiver, where the property is land paying revenue to the government, or land of which the revenue has been assigned or redeemed, and the court considers the interest of those concerned will be promoted by the management of the collector, the court may, with the consent of the collector, appoint him to be receiver of such property. So as far as Bombay High Court is concerned, you will have the office of the court receiver. In district, you have essentially maybe a private person being appointed, and Rule 5 of Order 40 provides. Am I audible to everybody? Uh,
Yes, sir.
all right. Yeah. So I just got a message that there is some problem. Right. So let us continue. So Rule 5 of Order 40 really contemplates that a court receiver can also be the collector of a particular district, provided these conditions are satisfied. Uh, this brings us to the second point: when is a court receiver appointed? Now, we have all come across several notice of motions and now interim applications. Prominent prayer being that of appointment of court receiver, apart from injunction that we see. And as we would have heard in court, and honorable judges essentially indicating that appointment of court receiver is not a matter of course. It is something which really warrants grave circumstances, something which a situation which may lead to deterioration of property or waste of property, and in such case, a court receiver is appointed. So this takes us to point number 3, which is when is a court receiver appointed? We have to bear in mind that this is something which can be asked for and prayed for only if extraordinary circumstances are made out. If you see the judgments on this point, which really reiterate what has been held by the Supreme Court as well and by other high courts. Let's see the first judgment of Sheila Arora, which is a division bench judgment of our high court. Essentially, it reads appointment of receiver is not to be made as a matter of course. There has to be a case made out to justify the same. By appointment of receiver, owner's rights to enjoy his property in the best possible manner to his choice stand curtailed. Being so, one has to take sufficient precautions and utmost care not to divest the owner of his property from its enjoyment, and certainly not on the basis of fanciful plea made by the other party in the absence of case being made out warranting appointment of a receiver. The learned single judge erred in allowing the motion for appointment of receiver, hence the impugned order cannot be sustained and is liable to be set aside. The second judgment of the Goa bench of the Bombay High Court of a learned single judge also indicates that the ratio is that unless there are excellent chances of succeeding in establishing facts made out in case and property in possession of opposite parties in danger of being wasted, there would be no appointment of court receiver, which has the effect of depriving opposite party of de facto possession. So, what can be gathered broadly from these observations in these two judgments essentially is that appointment of court receiver will somehow put fetters on the right of the person who is occupying a certain property. Uh, these rights being curtailed, the appointment of court receiver cannot be made only on the ground of some plea which is made by the plaintiff. You would have to really make out a case. Now let's discuss this. Which are the cases where a court receiver would be immediately granted, or where court receiver's appointment is normally seen? One example that you will find is suits under Section 6 of the Specific Relief Act, where the plaintiff asserts that he has been dispossessed from his property, immovable property, without following the due process of law within a period of 6 months from the date of filing of the suit. You will have judgments essentially to say that in suits under Section 6 of the Specific Relief Act, if a prima facie case or an overwhelming prima facie case is made out to show that the defendant is trying to change the nature of property. For instance, the defendant took over an open piece of land belonging to the plaintiff illegally without following due process of law, and he starts to change the nature of the property. That is to say, he is really carrying out construction work, he's doing piling work, so on and so forth, which will really make the property unusable for the plaintiff, or he has changed the status of the property. In such cases, you would find court receiver being appointed. In fact, there's a judgment of the learned single judge of this High Court, Justice D.G. Karnik, where he had held in a Section 6 suit where the plaintiff has made out a case that he was in possession, he was dispossessed illegally and without following due process of law. The courts will be well within their power to appoint a court receiver and to place the plaintiff in possession in capacity as agent of the receiver. This judgment was confirmed by a division bench headed by Justice H.L. Gokhale. Those citations are not there in this note. Yes, let me just increase. All right. So I hope I'm audible. So I was in the division bench judgment. The citations are not here. I'll circulate them first, but really this is an example of where a court receiver would be appointed. Another example is what you find in yes. So we'll just post the link in a bit. So right. So the other judgment or the other case or instances of court receiver is when you have in, for example, intellectual property cases where there is uh, infringing product with the defendant, and that has to be seized. The property may be in the form of cartons or such goods which form subject matter of the plaint on which the allegations of infringement are made. Court receiver is normally appointed so as to keep custody of the property and to protect the property. So when is court receiver appointed? It has to be something more than a mere case of grant of injunction. Injunction, of course, you will seek on the basis of prima facie case, balance of convenience, and irreparable harm. For appointment of court receiver, something more has to be shown, and that would be in the nature of threat to the property, that the property is being wasted, that the nature of the property is being changed, and you would then seek appointment of court receiver. It's only in very rare cases that you will find that at ad interim stage, a court receiver will be appointed. Appointment of court receiver normally would be, as we have seen, at the stage of final hearing of the motion or as the situation may demand. The third bulleted point, if you see when court receiver is appointed, we have mentioned with or without royalty. Now, as we will see in course of our webinar, uh, the appointment of a court receiver entails the office of the court receiver, its resources being employed for protection of the property and for the purposes of looking after the property, managing the property. That may entail certain expenses, and that is why many times as plaintiffs, depending on the fact situation of the case, there is a prayer made that the court receiver should be appointed without paying royalty. So this is important in two aspects, as we have seen. Depending on facts of the case, if the court receiver is required to be appointed, the expenses in respect of the court receiver's office is one part, and the second is the property itself may fetch certain value for which a royalty has to be determined. This will normally happen in cases where the defendant is in possession and the allegation of the plaintiff is that the defendant is in wrongful possession. Take a case where the defendant cannot show any valid document on the basis of which he entered into possession but is enjoying the property. If the defendant is in possession, normally the prayer that the plaintiff will ask is that court receiver be appointed and royalty be paid. The process of adjudication of royalty is a separate issue in itself. It's in Chapter 30 of the Bombay High Court Original Site Rules. You basically find out what is the price that can be fetched from that property. And the idea being that upon the royalty being deposited, the property is generating income, which income can be adjusted at the stage of final hearing of the suit. So with and without royalty, normally if the plaintiff is to be placed as an agent of the court receiver, that is basically the court receiver is in possession, the property is custodial aegis, and the plaintiff, for example, in a Section 6 suit, seeks being placed in possession, that will be as an agent of the receiver because the suit is still pending. So this is one nuance that we would have to keep in mind when applications are made for the purposes of appointment of court receiver and for being placed in possession. The fourth aspect that we will see today is on appointment of court receiver, duties, obligations, and powers of the court receiver. Now, appointment and discharge, we would have come across cases where a court receiver is appointed. What happens when the suit is finally disposed of? Whether by mere disposal of the suit, does it mean that the duties of the court receiver are over, he is automatically discharged, or whether there are certain nuances to it that an order of disposal of suit in itself does not discharge the court receiver of his obligations if he is placed in charge of property. The other aspect that we will see in course of this pointer or this subnote or subheading is the concept of custodial aegis. In a nutshell, custodial aegis is the property being under the protection of the court. So let us see the aspect of appointment and discharge. The leading case on this point is that of Hiralal Patni, AR 1962, after considering Hansbury laws of England and other commentaries. Essentially, the Supreme Court observed, and if we see, we are reading in the second paragraph, Order 40, Rule 1A now expressly provides that a receiver may be appointed whether before or after a decree. We have seen that in the sub-rule. As long as the order appointing a receiver remains unreversed, and as long as the suit remains a lis pendens, the functions of the receiver continue until his discharge by order of the court. The law may be briefly stated as thus, that is, if a receiver is appointed in a suit until judgment, the appointment is brought to an end by the judgment in the said action. If the receiver is appointed in a suit without his tenure being expressly defined, he will continue to be the receiver till his discharge. But after the final disposal of the suit, as between the parties to the litigation, the receiver's functions are usually terminated. He would still be answerable to the court as its officers till his final discharge. The court has ample power to continue the receiver even after a final decree is passed if the exigencies of the case so require. So it may sound peculiar because one would expect that after the suit is disposed, the work of the court receiver in that sense comes to an end. That may be true in cases that we come across, but there are nuances to this that we must keep in mind. We must keep in mind that when court receiver is appointed, for example, of a tenanted building, uh, he has a ledger of who are the tenants. He is in charge of the property, so to speak, as far as collection of rent is concerned. Merely by the suit getting disposed of, the office of the court receiver or the nature of duties that a court receiver performs is not automatically terminated. This is in sync with the realities of litigation. For example, as we have seen a tenanted building, even though the suit may have come to an end, a specific order of discharge would be required so that the court receiver winds down his work. He would draw his own accounts expenses, and then there would be a formal order of discharge. Otherwise, even after the suit has been disposed of, for example, a suit for dissolution of partnership firm, where a court receiver is placed in charge of the assets of the firm, disposal of the suit itself will not mean that his work or his appointment has lapsed or it has come to an end. This is something which was also discussed in the Atul Soni's case, single judge judgment of 1998 3 MHLJ. And if you see the second paragraph, really what has been observed is that the court receiver stands discharged only after he puts the property its status quo ante possession, unless otherwise directed by court, or unless the receiver was required to do something anew in respect of the property, and unless and until the receiver has submitted his accounts and they have been approved by the Commissioner for Accounts. It may be that after the order of discharge, the receiver may not take new decisions in respect of the property and may not encumber or burden the property additionally by his actions, but he can certainly take those steps which are necessary for the purpose of maintaining the possession of the property as between the parties to the suit or as between the third parties. A judicial order of discharge does not automatically result in disburdening the liability of the receiver or shifting his liabilities or relieving him from his liabilities. The order of appointment of receiver casts a burden on the receiver and gives him certain rights to carry that burden, whereas the order of discharge starts the process of unloading or unburdening the receiver. Where the occupant was in possession of the property at the time when the receiver was appointed, his possession with respect to the property is liable to be protected. So, apart from the aspect of appointment, which is normally encapsulated in the order by the Honorable Court, his discharge is a separate matter altogether. You will have situations where even after the suit is disposed of, the court receiver filing his court receiver reports in which directions are sought. Those directions could be in terms of payment of dues of the court receiver's office. Chapter 30 has a separate provision on how these fees are quantified and how the payment is to be made. So this is as far as the aspect of discharge is concerned. Let's see what are the duties. Now you will find the duties of the court receiver in order 40 rule 1 sub rule D itself. that is collection of rent and profits from the property, application and disposal of such rents and profits, execution of documents as the owner himself to institute and defend a suit, such powers as the court may deem fit. Rule 3 really deals with other areas of his obligations. That is, the court receiver is required to furnish security to account for what he will receive from the property, submit accounts half yearly for such period or form as directed by the court. The account basically includes the income received and expenses incurred, pay the amount due to the court, take responsibility for any reduction in the value of the property because of receiver's willful negligence, discharge the duties personally, and he should not delegate or assign any of the rights entrusted to him by the court. So that is why we see in the prayers which are sought in the court receiver's report, essentially a direction is always sought. The court receiver himself will not take a decision in respect of who should be appointed as a valuer, because under the statutory provisions he cannot delegate the functions which he has to perform. Whatever is entrusted to him by the court, it is the court receiver who will have to perform. And the prayers in the court receiver's application or report are more in the nature of seeking leave or sanction of the court for what is to be done in particular cases. Now, what happens if the court receiver fails to perform with his duty? Rule 4 says when the receiver fails to either submit a report as specified by the court, pay the amount due from him as directed by the court, cause loss of the property due to gross negligence, any other duty which the court directed him to do, the court may order the attachment of the property of the receiver to recover the loss caused due to his willful default or negligence. The court, after recovering all the losses from the proceeds received after selling receiver's property, will pay the balance, if any, to the receiver. I would submit to you that this is something which you will rarely find in courts where there is a dedicated office of the court receiver, entire infrastructure being put in place to ensure that orders of the court are implemented, properties are taken possession of, so on and so forth, right? And this is something that you will find if, I would hazard to guess, if there is a private receiver which is appointed, although there is nothing to say that sub rule 4 will not apply to case where there is a full-fledged court receiver's office. This brings us to another aspect that we normally hear with court receiver taking possession, namely that property becomes custodial legis. Now, the issue would be, when does property become custodial legis? Is it merely by appointment of a court receiver, or whether it is appointment of court receiver for the purpose of taking possession? You would have found cases where court receiver is appointed without any direction to take physical possession, and only symbolic possession is to be taken. So when does a property become custodial legis? In short, and there are consequences to this, as we know. If the property becomes custodial legis, if court receiver is appointed and he takes possession, any person interfering with the possession of the court receiver, anyone who in that sense violates the court receiver's possession would be liable for contempt. And this is because the appointment of court receiver having made the property custodial legis, any act contrary to it would really mean that it is, one, breach of an order, and secondly, in any event, it is breach or interference in the due course of administration of justice, because the property is really in the custody of the court. The court is the custodian of the property, and the property becomes custodial legis. In this aspect, we must bear one thing in mind, view taken by the Bombay High Court after noticing judgments from other high courts, is that the property will become custodial legis only after the court receiver takes possession, right? So if we see the judgment of ICICI versus Alpine 1999, judgment of a learned single judge, you will find the ratio of the judgment essentially holding that mere appointment of receiver by itself does not vest the property in him. The possession has to be taken. Apart from that, the court passing an order must comply with the requirement of Order 40 of CPC. However, even if possession is not taken by the defendant, the defendant would be prohibited from dealing with the property. But insofar as third parties are concerned, until possession is taken, they are free to move against the property in law. For property to be in custody of the court, the receiver must take possession. Once the receiver takes possession, the property is custodial legis. So we would find there are many cases on this aspect that a court receiver is appointed of, let's say, a tenanted property. Uh, there can be two situations. One is before the order of appointment of court receiver, the defendant has subletted or he has handed over possession of the tenanted rooms to a particular third party. Now, that third party is not concerned with the suit. He is not concerned with the lease between the plaintiff and defendant. He is a third party who is put in possession on the basis of either a leave and license or on the basis of some arrangement. Uh, what is to happen to such a party? So here, as I had indicated, two classes would broadly be formed. One is if this handing over of possession is before the court receiver being appointed and property becoming custodial legis, such third party cannot be held to be uh, liable for contempt. But take a case where the property has become custodial legis, there is the board of the court receiver which is placed on the property, and after that the defendant goes ahead and creates third party rights in any form whatsoever uh, with some third party, thereby inducting a third party after appointment of court receiver. Then in such case, this would be interference with administration of justice. The defendant, such defendant, can be hauled up for contempt because after the property becomes custodial legis, such kind of act cannot be committed. What is to happen with third party? There is a judgment of Justice Dhanuka Senior, essentially to say that if the third party is shown to be aware of the order, then the third party can also be said to be guilty of contempt. Otherwise, the contempt will lie against the party to the suit who is aware of the appointment of court receiver and of the fact that the court receiver has taken possession. We have seen one of the obligations of the court receiver is to sell the property that is within Rule 1 and Rule 4. So what is to happen in regard to such sale? Can such sale be done before a decree is passed? As we all know, interim relief is always in aid of final relief. Interim relief cannot, in that sense, be something which is beyond the final substantive prayer that you have made in your suit. And in that regard, question of law which had arisen, which was finally settled was Supreme Court, was that when a suit is filed, court receiver is appointed, the property is custodial legis with the court receiver. Can the court receiver exercise his powers for sale of such property even before a decree is passed? Because it is only after the processes of trial, after evidence is laid, can yes, it's only after such a decree is passed one can say if the plaintiff has been able to prove his claim, and if so, to what extent. So in such a case, the issue was, can the court receiver sell the property even before a decree is passed? The Supreme Court answered in the affirmative in the Karnataka ball bearing case and held that the powers of order of the court receiver under Order 40 are very wide, and that power will include the power to sell the subject custodial legis property even before a decree is passed. If we see point number 6, AR 99 Supreme Court, the Supreme Court held the language of Order 40, thus being of widest possible import. Any restriction as regards the power of the court to direct receiver to effect sale of immovable property prior to the decree does not and cannot arise. Order 40 Rule 1 and various sub-rules thereunder unmistakably depict that the court has unfettered powers in the event court feels that a sale of property would be just and convenient, having due regard to the situation in the matter. The pronouncement of the full bench as regards creation of an embargo in regard thereto seems to be rather too wide. The court must consider whether special interference with the possession of the defendant is required or not, and in the event court comes to such conclusion that there is likelihood of the immovable property in question being dissipated or such occurrence as is detailed more fully hereinafter, or party initiating the action suffering irreparable loss, unless the court gives appropriate protection, there should not be any hesitation in directing the sale of the immovable property. So, really speaking, the orders, the powers of the court under Order 40 are very wide. These powers are to be exercised when the court finds it to be just and convenient to appoint court receiver with powers which are mentioned in the in order 40 itself, and such powers will include power to sell the property even before a decree is passed. The other duty which you would have noticed is the ability to file a suit or be sued against. There are times when subject property is under the is with the court receiver. The court receiver is appointed. The question is, you would find at many times that you are required to make the court receiver a defendant to bring him on record, because the subject property, which is the subject matter of the suit, is custodial legis. So here you will find that there are judgments. This is a judgment-based law, that a court receiver being made a defendant in a suit requires prior sanction of the court, because he is an officer of the court. You cannot file a suit against court receiver without seeking leave of the honorable court. The issue is whether such leave has to be obtained before you file a suit, like clause 12, or it can be done ex post facto, that is after filing of a suit without seeking leave. Can a party seek permission of the court? Here, the law is very clear, although as we have seen, the provision of seeking leave is not to be found in any statute. You will not find it in Order 40 or any other provision. But judgments have essentially laid down that if your suit happens to have court receiver who has been appointed as a court, you must seek leave of that court to proceed against him. But not seeking such leave is a curable defect. That curable defect can be cured even after a suit is filed, and you can seek permission and seek ratification later. If you see the judgment of Shantaram Danis, that is of the Bombay High Court, essentially what was held was filing of the suit by the court receiver without obtaining leave is an irregularity curable in law and is not fatal if either after filing of the suit by the court receiver, the leave is obtained from the concerned superior court which appointed him, or where the court receiver is discharged and is substituted a party having right, title or interest in the property over which the court receiver is appointed. The irregularity in filing of suit by the court receiver without obtaining permission at its inception does not render the proceedings in the suit ultra vires if subsequent to the filing of the suit, the court receiver ceases in his place. Now, this was a case where the court receiver had filed suit, because if we see in the provisions earlier, you will find there is also power to file litigation. Yes, there it is. So collection of rent, disposal, so on and so forth. So you can have a situation where court receiver, being custodial legis, feels that a suit has to be filed, and he files a suit, he has to take prior permission of the court. Similarly, if the defendant happens to be a court receiver, you need to seek leave of the honorable court for this purpose. These are broadly the aspects that would come about. The provision itself is quite limited, in the sense it is only Order 40 and these rules. For the Bombay High Court, would also have to take into account the Bombay High Court original side rules and Chapter 30 therein, where there are rules set out for conduct of business by the court receiver on various aspects, how quantification would be done, how royalties to be determined, how court receivers' fees are to be determined, so on and so forth. So these are the broad aspects that we must keep in mind in relation to law relating to court receiver. So I'll share this note with the administrator. I'll email it, and you can then drop it in. You can share it with everyone, right? So this is as far as the relevant provisions of Order 40 and other aspects. I mean, judgment-based practices as far as court receiver's office is concerned. So this brings us to an end of the note that we have and the salient features that we have to cover. If there are any questions, we can take them now. Yes. So can I proceed with answering there are some questions on the chat. Can I proceed with answering them, or?
Yes, sir. You may take
Yeah.
directly the questions.
All right. So one of the first questions is, who determines the royalty? How is it determined? So you would have to it's on a case-to-case basis. The provisions you will find in Chapter 30. How royalty is to be determined. Take a case where the defendant is allegedly in possession without any authority. The court receiver is appointed of the property so that the property becomes custodial legis. That means it cannot be sold, no third party transactions can take place, but the court permits the defendant to reside in the property, not to disturb the possession. In such a case, there is a process by which royalty is to be determined after hearing of both the parties, and the amount which is finally fixed will be ratified by the court after hearing the parties again. This is in a court receiver's report, right? Yes. Second question is, do you challenge a court receiver's report itself or the order of the court approving the report? So when a court receiver's report is filed, it will be served to all parties. If there are any portions of the entire report which one party may have objection with, he'll file a reply to the report to oppose the contents of the report. If the report is ultimately accepted by the court, that order of the learned judge will be can be appealed depending on the facts of the case, whether it's a judgment which falls within the ambit of clause 15 of the latest patent. So that is how you would have to go about it. Suggest a good book for students to understand provisions relating to property suits. You won't find a single book as such. I mean, there are different, you would have to go through commentary on Transfer of Property Act, so on and so forth, and other substantive laws, right? Can arbitrator appoint a court receiver or only a private receiver is appointed? This is really a good question, because court receiver, the lecture was predicated on Order 40. As we have seen in Section 9 and now the amended Section 17, the tribunal and the court under Section 9 can also appoint court receiver. The ambit of the parameters are by and large similar. Court receiver is not to be appointed as a matter of course. The same ratio will apply. There is a judgment of our High Court to say that arbitrator under Section 17 cannot appoint the court receiver of Bombay High Court. So that is the position of law. So a private receiver can be appointed by an arbitrator. The next question is, would willful disobedience to court receiver's order be civil contempt for the purposes of 1917 Act? So really a court receiver's order per se you will not find. You will find a court receiver's report in which there will be several prayers. Those prayers would be that, for example, if the defendant has created third-party rights after appointment of court receiver, after the property has become custodial legis, the court receiver will ask for a prayer what action should be taken or should contempt action be initiated. So ultimately, everything comes before the court. The court receiver is an officer of the court. Whatever action is to be taken in terms of adjudication, that the court will finally decide. Is there a checklist for overseeing corruption doesn't take place? I'm not aware of a checklist per se, but we have our rules and everything has to be placed before the court. The court, honorable court, will finally decide what further steps have to be taken. If a court receiver is appointed in a suit between tenant and subtenant, does a landlord in his eviction suit have to make receiver a party to take possession from him? So if the property has become custodial legis, the prudent thing to do would be to make court receiver a party, and before you file such a suit, seek leave of the court which has appointed the court receiver. Because if you are seeking recovery of possession of a property which is custodial legis, then really the court receiver should be made a party. Then if receiver is appointed by High Court in Section 9, then can the arbitrator discharge him, or it is required to take order from the court to discharge him? Very interesting question. So let's take a case where the court receiver is appointed by the Bombay High Court. An order for discharge of the receiver which is appointed will come into place really after some substantive orders or substantial progress has been done before the arbitrator, or before an final order is passed by the arbitrator. According to me, discharge of a court receiver, really speaking, can be done by the court itself, because as we have seen, discharge of court receiver depends on orders of the court. So if the Section 17 application is finally dismissed, maybe an application would lie by the successful party before the tribunal to say that the court receiver should be discharged, because once the property is custodial aegis, the unwinding of affairs of the court receiver can be done only under supervision of the court. Then, when the plaintiff seeks to become agent of the court receiver, does it attract royalty? Any provision that the court receiver be appointed without any royalty or fees? So the provision you will find in OS rules, I quite frankly don't have the OS rulebook with me presently, but plaintiff being agent of the court, does it attract royalty? Whether royalty should be levied or not is a decision that the court will take. If the court finds that, for example, in a Section 6 suit, the plaintiff was illegally dispossessed, that it was his property, and he's being placed back in possession, the court can say that royalty should not be imposed. I think Justice D.G. Karnik's judgment of single judge, I think it deals with this point. But in any event, this is something which would arise. And in section, all right. In case of default in repayment of loan and English mortgage being enforced, what procedure for appointment of court receiver in such case, and how can property be sold? So in event of default of repayment of loan, a suit is filed. It's a case of English mortgage. You will seek your injunctive reliefs as the case may be. If you make out a case for appointment of court receiver can be appointed. As we have seen in Karnataka ball bearing case, if it is just and convenient to sell the property, it's something that you can urge before the court, but really it will depend on facts of each case whether court receiver will sell the property before a decree is passed. I would think it's a rare occurrence, and it will strictly depend on the facts of the case. In Section 6 suit, while making plaintiff as agent of court receiver, in addition to principles of appointment of receiver, will the principles of status quo ante also apply? So let's see this. Court receiver being appointed and property become custodial aegis really means that this will be subject to outcome of the suit, right? So status quo ante per se will depend on what is the final decree which is passed, right? So that will determine what is the status quo ante, which, if at all, it will prevail. If the defendant succeeds in the suit or the plaintiff fails, then there will be an application for restitution of property, right? And last thing is, how do we get the notes now? I am a bit technically challenged. If the moderator can just help me out here. I thought if I share the content, it will automatically come with links. So I'll see how, let me see how I can drop this on or send it to the moderator and he can share with.
Yes, sir. We will share it with all the participants.
You will, no?
Yes.
Chalo, great. So I think that's about it.
So, sir, I would like to thank you on behalf of myself, the Law Chamber of Siddharth Murarka, and the Law Club. Thank you so much, sir, for enlightening us on the court receiver. It was indeed very informative session for all of us, and I'm sure that the same will surely help in uplifting our profession to new heights.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure. Take care and stay safe, everybody. Thank you.
Same to you, sir. Thank you. Thank you so much, sir.